I thought the worst part of my brother's wedding was over, but I was wrong. After everything seemed to settle down, my new sister-in-law decided to humiliate me in front of the whole family. What she didn't know was that my brother had a secret about her past that was going to change everything. It was a family brunch after the wedding, a casual gathering where everyone was supposed to relax and catch up. I was still trying to get over the events of the wedding day, but I didn't want to let it show. SIL, on the other hand, was acting like everything was perfect. She looked polished, charming, and so put together, but there was something about her that didn't sit right with me. I could tell she was trying too hard, and I could feel the tension. SIL started making small, condescending comments towards me, like how I was still single and struggling, while everyone else had moved forward in life. I kept my mouth shut, not wanting to make a scene, but it was getting harder to hold my frustration in. She was poking at my insecurities, and it was making me feel small. Finally, in a moment of irritation, I snapped back at her. I didn't expect her to take it so far. Instead of letting it go, SIL seized the opportunity to turn the family against me. She casually mentioned something from my past, something deeply personal and embarrassing that no one else knew about. She made sure to say it loudly, with a smirk, as if she enjoyed seeing me squirm. It was a moment I'll never forget. Everyone in the room went silent, and I could feel their eyes on me. I wanted to disappear. I couldn't believe she'd exposed something so private in front of the whole family. The worst part was how she watched me, enjoying every second of my discomfort. It was like she was feeding off of it, getting a twisted sense of power from my reaction. I was humiliated, and there was nothing I could do about it in that moment. The damage was done. Little did she know, though, my brother had been keeping a secret. He knew about her past, about the things she'd been hiding, and he was planning to expose it. What I didn't realize then was that everything was about to turn around, and SIL's perfect life was about to unravel. After the wedding, things didn't feel the same. I began to notice how my new sister-in-law, who had always seemed nice at first, started acting differently around me. She wasn't openly rude, but there was something off about the way she treated me. It was like she was always trying to make herself look better, in little ways that no one else seemed to notice. Her comments were usually sweet on the surface, but they carried an edge, almost as if she were trying to prove something. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the stress of the wedding and the new family dynamic. But over time, her behavior started to stand out more. The more she became a permanent part of the family, the more control she seemed to have. She wasn't the type of person to just blend in. She made sure everyone noticed her. She had this way of taking charge of any situation, whether it was a family dinner or even just picking where we'd all sit at the table. It made me feel uncomfortable, like she wanted to be the center of attention all the time. I began to notice a shift in the family's attention as well. Before she came along, my brother and I had always been close, and I never felt out of place. But now, every time we all got together, it felt like the spotlight was on her. She had a way of talking about her life, her career, and her achievements that made everyone else seem less impressive. It wasn't that anyone disliked her, but she was always the one getting the compliments, the praise, and the attention. Slowly, I began to feel like I didn't matter as much anymore, like I was becoming invisible in my own family. It wasn't just that I felt ignored. There was a sense of unease growing inside me. I started to realize that she wasn't just charming everyone with her personality. She was planting subtle doubts about me. I couldn't point to anything specific at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I saw the small things she did to make herself appear perfect in comparison to me. If we were talking about work or life choices, she would casually bring up how successful she was, how she had everything figured out, while implying that I was still struggling. She didn't say it outright, but the way she framed things made it clear that she thought of herself as superior. I also noticed her finding ways to insert herself into every conversation, always steering things back to her accomplishment. She would make little comments about how much better she was at handling things, always acting like she had life completely under control, while I sometimes felt like I was falling behind. She never outright criticized me, but there was always this sense that I wasn't measuring up to her standards. It was like she was trying to convince the family that she was the perfect one, and I was the one who hadn't figured it all out yet. What bothered me the most was how she did it without anyone realizing what was happening. She didn't need to attack me directly. Instead, she made everything about her look flawless, while I was left to look like the one who couldn't quite get it together. It was hard to shake off the feeling that she was trying to create this image of herself that no one could question. And the worst part was, it seemed to be working. Slowly, the family began to see her as the ideal partner for my brother, and I started feeling more and more like an outsider in my own family. I kept telling myself it was just in my head, that I was overreacting. But the more time passed, the more obvious it became that she was actively trying to make me look less successful and more flawed. It was like she was trying to set the stage to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the one everyone adored. while I faded into the background. Every comment, every little move she made, seemed carefully planned to make herself look better and me look worse. It wasn't just jealousy, it was something deeper, something that made me question her true intentions. The day after the wedding, we had a casual brunch at my family's house. It was supposed to be a relaxed, fun event, just a way to gather everyone together after all the wedding chaos. Most people were still talking about the ceremony and enjoying the leftover food, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. SIL, as always, seemed perfectly put together, chatting and laughing with everyone like she was the center of attention. As the morning went on, I started to notice how she kept throwing in little comments about her life. She wasn't being direct, but every time she spoke, it was clear she was comparing herself to me. She talked about how successful she was, how she had it all figured out, and how she was always moving forward in life. Then she would casually slip in something about me, almost like a joke, about how I wasn't quite there yet. "It's so nice to be settled and confident," she said. "I'm sure it must be tough still trying to figure things out at this stage in life." She said it like it was nothing, but I could feel the sting in her word. The worst part was how the rest of the family reacted. Instead of calling her out or even feeling uncomfortable, they just laughed along with her. It wasn't like they were rude, but they were feeding into her narrative, nodding and agreeing with her as if everything she said was just a fun joke. It felt like they were on her side, like they saw her as this perfect, confident woman who had it all together, while I was the one left to feel awkward and out of place. It was clear they didn't fully understand what she was doing, but I could feel it. Every time she made one of those comments, it pushed me further away from them. I tried to hold my tongue, not wanting to make a scene, but it was getting harder. The more she spoke, the more I felt like she was digging at me, and the less anyone seemed to notice. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she made it look like she was the ideal person, and I was the one who hadn't quite figured it out. It was a subtle kind of attack, but it felt like she was intentionally trying to make me feel small. Finally, after she made another one of her little jabs, I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped back, trying to keep my voice steady, but I knew I had said too much. It was as if all the frustration I had been holding in came rushing out in one moment. I felt like everyone was staring at me as I said something about how I wasn't in a hurry to settle like she was, and that it wasn't as easy for everyone to have everything figured out so quickly. SIL didn't get mad or defensive. She just laughed it off, acting like she wasn't bothered at all. But I could see it in her eyes. She had enjoyed seeing me get upset. It was like she knew she had pushed my buttons, and she liked that she had made me feel uncomfortable in front of everyone. I could tell from the way she smiled, as if it was all just a game to her. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just some harmless teasing. It was part of a bigger pattern, where she constantly put me down while everyone else just laughed along. It wasn't just a joke to her. She was trying to build herself up by making me feel inferior. And it was working, at least for now. Later that evening, as everyone else was still talking and laughing, my brother pulled me aside. He handed me a drink and led me to a quieter corner of the house, away from the others. I could tell he had something important to say. His face looked serious, like he was weighing his words carefully before speaking. After a few moments of silence, he finally said, "There's something I need to tell you about Sarah." His voice was low, almost like he didn't want anyone else to overhear. I raised an eyebrow, not sure what to expect. He leaned in a little closer and lowered his voice even more. Her ex, the one she was with before me, he left her something in his will. I was confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Something like money or property?" He shook his head. "No, it wasn't money. It's something much more embarrassing." His words were slow, like he was still trying to figure out how to explain it. My curiosity piqued, and I waited for him to continue. The ex had been a wealthy man, one with a lot of connections and influence. But what he left behind for Sarah wasn't something most people would consider valuable. In fact, it was something that could ruin her image if anyone found out. It was a deeply personal item, something that had been hidden for a long time. My brother didn't go into too much detail, but it was clear that it wasn't the kind of thing Sarah would want anyone to know about. She had worked hard to keep it a secret, and her pride had kept her from ever sharing it with anyone in the family. I felt a mix of shock and curiosity. I had no idea what this could be, but I knew it must be serious. The fact that my brother was telling me about it meant it was something he felt strongly about. He hesitated, like he was unsure if he should go further. "I don't know what to do with this information," he admitted. "Part of me wants to expose it, just to show everyone who she really is, but I don't know when or how. I'm not even sure if it's the right thing to do." It was a lot to take in. I couldn't believe that my sister-in-law had a secret like this, especially after everything that had happened with her earlier that day. It seemed like everything she had worked so hard to show the family was nothing more than a carefully constructed image. My brother was clearly torn between exposing the truth and protecting her from the consequences. I didn't know what to say. I could tell my brother was struggling with what to do. It was clear he wanted to reveal the truth, but he was unsure how it would affect everyone, especially our family. I just nodded, not sure what the right thing to say was. It was a lot to process, and I had no idea what would happen next. After everything that had happened, I couldn't stop thinking about how Estelle had humiliated me in front of the entire family. The way she made those hurtful comments, pretending it was all a joke, made me feel small. I had always been quiet about her behavior, but now I was done. I couldn't let her get away with it. I needed to do something about it, but I wasn't going to confront her directly. I knew that wouldn't work. Instead, I started to think of a plan that would expose her for who she really was. I knew that her public image meant everything to her. She spent so much time making sure everyone saw her as perfect, always in control and flawless. That was her game, and I was going to turn it on her. I wasn't going to let her walk around pretending to be the perfect woman anymore. I was going to make sure she showed her true colors, but I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just go up to her and start a fight. Instead, I decided to set a trap. I started casually bringing up the topic of her ex, who had left her something in his will. I didn't do it in an obvious way. I dropped small comments here and there. At family gatherings, I would mention how I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for Sil to deal with what she received from her. I would say things like, it must have been so difficult for her to accept what he left behind, especially since it wasn't what she expected. These were vague comments, but I knew they would make her uncomfortable. I was trying to get her to react, to reveal something she had been hiding for so long. The first time I mentioned it, I could see her reaction. Her face changed slightly, and she quickly tried to shift the conversation to something else. But I didn't let up. I kept bringing it up in different ways, always making sure to mention how difficult it must have been for her to face what her ex left her. The more I did it, the more I saw her start to get nervous. She was trying to hide it, but I could tell she was worried. Every time I mentioned it, she would deflect, pretending it wasn't a big deal, but I could see the cracks in her perfect image starting to form. It was working. She was getting more and more uncomfortable, and I didn't need to do anything more than make these little comments. The family started to notice, too. They didn't understand the full story, but they could see that there was something off about the way she reacted. The more I dropped hints, the more it seemed like her carefully constructed life was starting to unravel. Sil couldn't keep pretending everything was perfect, and I was enjoying every moment of it. I didn't want to destroy her in front of everyone. That wasn't my goal. I just wanted to make her show her true self, to let the family see who she really was. I knew she wouldn't be able to keep hiding forever. So, I kept my strategy going, quietly making her nervous, and slowly letting the truth seep out. I wasn't going to confront her head-on. I just needed to give her enough rope to hang herself. And I could feel that she was getting closer to doing just that. As I continued to drop small hints about Sil's ex and his will, I began to notice changes in the family's behavior. At first, they didn't say much, but over time, I could see that they were becoming more curious. It wasn't long before a few of them started asking her questions, trying to learn more about what had happened with her ex and why she never talked about it. Sil didn't handle the questions well. The first time someone brought it up, she gave a nervous laugh and quickly changed the topic, acting like it wasn't a big deal. But the more people asked, the more defensive she became. Whenever the subject came up, she would start making excuses, saying things like, "It's really not something I want to talk about," or "I've moved on from that part of my life." She always seemed uncomfortable, and it made me smile inside. She wasn't as in control as she wanted everyone to believe. I kept planting those little seeds, talking about how hard it must have been for her to keep such a personal matter hidden. I would say things like, "It must have been tough to deal with something so private, especially with how important it is to keep up appearances." Every time I said something like that, I could see her getting more and more anxious. She tried her best to stay calm and change the subject, but I could tell that the pressure was building. As the questions about her exes kept coming up, a few family members started to look at her different. They weren't saying anything out loud, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They didn't understand the full story, but they could tell that something wasn't right. Sil's reactions were so over the top that they began to wonder why she was so sensitive about it. No one dared to confront her directly. It was clear that the family didn't want to cause a scene, but there was a shift. People were starting to notice the cracks in her perfect image. Even my brother, who had always been protective of her, seemed less certain now. He didn't say anything, but I could see that he was paying more attention to how she was reacting. I was starting to see the results of my plan. Esquel was on edge, and the family was starting to question her. They didn't know the full truth, but the more I talked about it, the more they doubted her. She could no longer maintain her facade of perfection, and it was becoming clear that she wasn't as invincible as she thought. But she still didn't know what was coming. It was during one of our usual family dinners when things finally came to a head. We were all sitting around the table, talking and laughing, when someone casually brought up the subject of SIL's ex and his will. The question wasn't anything serious at first, just a simple, innocent curiosity. But it was enough to make SIL snap. Her face immediately changed. She went from calm and collected to visibly tense. For a moment, she just stared at the person who had asked the question, and then she shot back, her voice sharp. "Why does everyone keep asking about that? It's none of your business." The change in her tone caught everyone off guard, and the room went quiet. She tried to laugh it off at first, but it was clear that she was upset. Her usual cool, calm, and collected demeanor was slipping, and it was starting to show. The way she reacted was nothing like the polished, perfect image she had worked so hard to maintain. The cracks in her facade were beginning to widen, and I could see that she was losing control. One of my cousins, probably not understanding the tension, asked again, "But don't you think it's strange? You never talk about him, and we're all curious. He was such a big part of your life." That was the moment everything seemed to break. SIL, now furious, snapped. "I don't have to explain myself to any of you. Stop digging into my past." She looked around the table, her eyes wild, and continued, "You're all so quick to judge, but none of you know what it's like to go through what I've been through. I've worked hard for everything, and I don't need anyone's pity or question." Her voice was rising with every word, and I could see the anger in her eyes. It was like the last bit of control she had over her image was slipping away. She was no longer the perfect, graceful woman everyone thought she was. She was angry, defensive, and desperate to hide something. The more she spoke, the more it became clear to everyone that there was more to her past than she was letting on. I remained calm throughout the entire exchange. I didn't say a word. I just watched as she unraveled in front of everyone. It was almost surreal to see her act like this after all the little jabs she had taken at me, trying to make me feel small. Now it was her turn to feel exposed. It was as if the perfect image she had worked so hard to build was crumbling before our eyes. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. Her face flushed with anger, and she stood up from the table. "I'm done with this," she shouted, throwing her napkin down before storming out of the room. The rest of us sat there in stunned silence, not sure what to do. The damage had been done, though. Everyone could see the cracks now, and no one was going to look at her the same way again. The tension in the room was thick, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She had finally exposed her true self, and it wasn't as perfect as she wanted everyone to believe. She had tried to cover up her secret for so long, but in the end, her anger had shown more than any carefully crafted smile ever could. A few weeks later, the family gathered again for a big holiday celebration. The house was filled with people, the smell of food in the air, and the usual chatter. But this time, there was an undeniable tension hanging over the room. Everyone was still talking about what had happened at the last family dinner, where SIL had lost her cool. Her outburst had left a lasting impression, and it seemed like the whole family was on edge, waiting for something to happen. I could feel it too, but I wasn't about to do anything to make things worse. This time, however, something unexpected happened. A few relatives had started to dig deeper into the situation. One of them had looked up public records of her ex's will, and what they found was shocking. It turned out that the ex had left SIL something that contradicted everything she had worked so hard to portray. The item wasn't money or property, but it was something far worse for her. It was a personal item, something deeply embarrassing that could destroy the perfect image she had built over the years. It was an old piece of memorabilia, something that could be seen as compromised. It was clear that SIL had been trying to hide it from everyone. The moment it was made public, the entire family started whispering. The quiet gossip spread like wildfire. At first, no one could believe it. How could someone so polished, so perfect, be hiding something like this? But as the truth came out, it became impossible to ignore. I watched as SIL's world began to unravel right before my eyes. I could see her trying to hold it together, putting on that same fake smile, but it was clear she was struggling. The more the family talked about it, the more her carefully crafted image started to fall apart. She was no longer the perfect woman everyone admired. Now, she was the person everyone was questioning. What struck me the most was that I never had to expose her directly. I had planted the seeds, made a few casual comments, and let the truth spread on its own. SIL had tried so hard to control her image, to make sure no one saw the real her. But in the end, it wasn't me who exposed her. It was her own secrets coming to light. She couldn't hide them forever, and now everyone knew what she had been trying to keep hidden. As the day went on, the whispers grew louder. I could see the looks people were giving her, the quiet conversations behind her back. I could see the shame in her eyes, but I didn't say a word. It was almost satisfying to watch her finally face the consequences of all the lies and the manipulation she had used to keep everyone in the dark. It was a slow unraveling, and I knew she would never be the same again. The fallout was inevitable. Once the truth about SIL's ex and his will became known, her perfect image began to crack completely. The family, who had once admired her for her seemingly flawless life, now started to question everything about her. Every conversation seemed to be about her past, and not in a good way. The whispers grew louder, and I could see that people were judging her. It was as if everyone was finally seeing the real person behind the facade she had worked so hard to create. SIL became the target of family gossip. People were shocked by what they had learned, and they couldn't stop talking about it. They all wondered how someone who seemed so perfect could have such a dark secret. The truth had shattered her carefully crafted image, and now, she was just another person in the family, no longer the untouchable, flawless woman they had all looked up to. She was exposed, and the family couldn't look at her the same way again. I could see her trying to salvage her reputation. She tried to act like nothing had changed, but it was obvious that the truth had caught up with her. She became defensive, snapping at people who dared to ask her questions. But it didn't matter anymore. The family had seen her for who she really was, and they weren't willing to listen to her version of the story anymore. They were done with the lies and the manipulation. One day, SIL confronted me. She was furious, her eyes blazing with anger. "This is all your fault," she shouted, pointing a finger at me. "You ruined my life. You made sure everyone knew about my secret, and now look at me." Her voice was filled with bitterness and blame, but I didn't react. I stayed calm, not letting her words get to me. She tried to make me feel guilty, but I couldn't. I didn't need to destroy her. I just let the truth come out on its own. The family had figured it out, and they had turned on her. It wasn't my fault that she couldn't keep her secrets hidden forever. I could see in her eyes that she wanted to lash out, to make me feel as miserable as she was. But the truth was already out, and there was no going back. The family no longer cared about her version of the events. They had made up their minds. They had seen her for what she really was. For me, this wasn't a victory. I didn't feel proud of what had happened. There was no satisfaction in seeing her exposed. I didn't want to watch her fall from grace. I just wanted things to be fair. The moment felt like closure, though. I had been humiliated by her, and now she was the one who had to face the consequences. She couldn't hide behind her perfect image anymore, and I knew that, in some way, she was paying for what she had done to me and others. But there was no joy in it for me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I had simply let the truth come out, and it had done the rest. The family had made up their minds, and now it was over. SIL's life had changed, and she would never be able to regain the respect she once had. After everything had happened, I found myself sitting with my brother one evening. It was quiet, almost peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of calm between us. The chaos of the past few weeks seemed to settle down, and we both knew the truth was finally out. There was no more pretending, no more hiding. SIL had tried so hard to keep her perfect image, but now it was shattered for everyone to see. My brother spoke first, his voice low and tired. "I've been planning to leave her for a while now," he admitted, "but I wasn't sure how to do it. After everything that's happened, though it's just the final straw." I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He had been dealing with so much behind closed doors, but he never let anyone know. The public unraveling of SIL had pushed him to the point where he couldn't pretend anymore. It had to end. I didn't say much in response. I had my own thoughts about everything, but I didn't need to say anything. The truth was out, and that was enough. I didn't have to push my brother to take action. It had already started to happen. SIL had destroyed herself with her own arrogance and pride. She had thought she could control everything, but in the end, her own actions exposed her for who she truly was. I found a strange sense of peace in all of this. Watching SIL fall apart wasn't something I had wanted or planned for, but seeing her do it to herself gave me closure. She didn't need anyone to take her down. Her own ego and need for control had done the job. She couldn't keep pretending anymore, and that was the most satisfying part. As I reflected on everything, I realized something important. Sometimes revenge isn't necessary. You don't need to make someone pay for their actions. Often, people will expose themselves with their own mistakes, their own behavior. SIL had tried to make me feel small, to keep me in the background while she stood in the spotlight. But in the end, it was her that fell, not me. And I didn't need to lift a finger to make that happen. In a way, that was the best kind of revenge, letting someone's true nature show to everyone else. It was a quiet victory, not one that needed to be celebrated, but one that brought me peace. Sometimes, the best way to handle a situation isn't to seek revenge. It's to let people show who they really are. And in the end, they'll take care of the rest.